Penguin Random House Audio presents First, Sandra Day O'Connor by Evan Thomas. Read for you by Kirsten Potter. Prologue. In 1981, when Ronald Reagan nominated Sandra Day O'Connor to become the first female justice on the Supreme Court, the Bulletin led every TV news broadcast and major newspaper in the country and many abroad. The cover of Time magazine read simply, "Justice, at last." O'Connor's confirmation hearing that September quickly became a huge media event. There were more requests for press credentials than there had been for the Senate Watergate Committee hearings in 1973. A new media institution, cable TV, carried the hearings live, a first for a judicial nomination. Tens of millions of people saw and heard a composed, radiant, hazel-eyed woman with a broad, gap-toothed smile and unusually large hands testify for 3 days before middle-aged men who seemed not quite sure whether to interrogate her or open the door for her. The vote to confirm her was unanimous. Nearly 16 years before Madeleine Albright became Secretary of State, a dozen years before Ruth Bader Ginsburg joined O'Connor on the bench, 2 years before Sally Ride flew into space, Sandra O'Connor entered the proverbial room where it happens. No woman had ever sat in one of the 9 chairs at the mahogany table in the oak-paneled conference room where the justices of the United States Supreme Court meet to rule on the law of the land. By the 1980s, women had begun to break through gender barriers in the professions, as well as in the academy and the military, but none had achieved such a position of eminence and public power. The law had been an especially male domain. When she graduated from Stanford Law School in 1952, established law firms were not hiring woman lawyers, even if, like O'Connor, they had graduated near the top of their class. O'Connor did not regard herself as a revolutionary. Her success was owed in no small part to her ability to marry ambition to restraint. She was a person for all seasons, said Ronald Reagan when he nominated her for the court. She saw herself as a bridge between an era where women were protected and submissive toward an era of true equality between the sexes. At the same time, she saw that women might have to work twice as hard to get ahead, that men might be threatened, or at the very least unsure about the new order, and that there was no use fretting about it. She understood that she was being closely watched. "It's good to be first," she liked to say to her law clerks, "but you don't want to be the last." In her chambers at the Supreme Court that autumn of 1981, the mail poured in by the truckload, tens of thousands of letters, many supportive, some not. A few were from angry men who sent naked pictures of themselves. O'Connor was taken aback by this ugly, primitive protest against the presence of a woman on the court, but she had learned how to shrug off insults, snubs, and innuendo, and focus on the job at hand. At the traditional opening of the court term, on the first Monday in October, O'Connor took her place at the end of the long mahogany bench above where the lawyers would argue. As the first case was presented, the other justices immediately began firing questions at the lawyer standing at the lectern 10 feet away. For 30 minutes, as the legal arguments and questions flew back and forth in a complex case involving oil leasing, she remained silent. "Shall I ask my first question?" O'Connor wondered. "I know the press is waiting. All are poised to hear me," she wrote later that day, recreating the scene in her journal. From her seat on the high bench, she began to ask a question, but almost immediately the lawyer talked over her. "He is loud and harsh," O'Connor wrote, "and says he wants to finish what he is saying. I feel put down." She would not feel that way for long. She was, in a word, tough. She could be emotional. She laughed easily and was not ashamed to cry in private, though never over embarrassment or small slights. But she refused to brood and instead forged ahead. She knew she was smarter than most, sometimes all, of the men she worked with, but she never
Sample complete. Ready to continue?